Hey everyone, Fearless Dumbo here and welcome to another video. We're a couple days away from launch and in this one I'm going to outline a rough plan for a Freeze Ignite Crossbow concept I've been working on with the goal of building a boss killer. I'm going to explain some of the multi-ailment synergies and how to turn that into big damage with a hypothetical 6-link and swap, and I'll also discuss why Witch Hunter because there are other options. I'm going to talk a little bit about passive tree, leveling, and some other potentially OP combinations as backup plans because obviously nothing is guaranteed here, and it goes without saying that this is not a full build guide, but it is a result of a lot of time spent theory crafting and analyzing game footage. If you are interested in following along, subscribe and I'll be doing some fairly regular updates, tips, what I found useful or strong along the way. Or you could follow along with my profile. It's going to be public. There's a link in the description. Let's start with the basis, which is Ignite. If you have watched any of the footage carefully, you'll have noticed that DPS uptime for hits is abysmal. Because of that, and because of the reworked damaging ailment system, Ignite is very attractive. If you take a close look at some of the combination ailment supports, it has huge upside potential. To make it really pop off, I'm pairing Ignite with Freeze, and I'll explain why in just a second. In order for this to make the most sense, I need to start with the freeze setup first. Crossbows have a pretty solid looking freeze package in permafrost bolts with good effectiveness supports like glaciation, which gives 50% more freeze buildup, and deep freeze, which gives us an extra 50% duration. And importantly, chill and freeze are going to be some of the best defensive layers for bosses in the game. Slowing them down will help keep you alive alongside Witch Hunter's Ascension notable, which I'll also cover later in this video. If you've done uber bossing with a cold skill since the 3.25 patch in PoE 1, you'll know exactly what I mean. I'm also going to throw on Biting Cold and Cold Penetration to further speed up the freezing process. And finally, and certainly not least, I'm adding Ice Bite to this skill. This works differently than it did in PoE 1. Now the support has a modifiable duration and reads attacks gain 35% of damage as extra cold damage for 3 seconds when freezing an enemy with supported skills. This means we can freeze an enemy with our permafrost bolts, and if we look closely at the top part of the card, it reads, infuses all of your attacks with cold damage for a short time. All of them, including Explosive Grenade. Now this doesn't help out the size of our Ignite, but if we're building a fat fire hit with a grenade, throwing 35% more cold damage on top is like a free S tier support that doesn't require a socket, and depending on the ordering of freeze consumption, it might also help us apply a new second freeze after FrostFire consumes it. Which brings me to the start of this whole theory craft, FrostFire. This support, if you can meet the conditional of hitting a frozen enemy, is borderline broken. It gives 100% more magnitude of Ignite. More in Path of Exile is a multiplier. Now the system that applies damaging ailments has changed in PoE 2, and the basics are you get 20% of the fire damage from the hit that inflicted it. This doesn't take into consideration modifiers that influence how much damage they would take from the hit, like penetration, but crucially it means crits are now valuable, and they've largely removed some of the hit downsides related to damaging ailments from Path of Exile 1, so game on. This brings us to our damage dealer. I plan on using Explosive Grenade to generate the ignites. It has the best attack damage effectiveness for crossbow skills that we know about and inherently converts 20% of physical damage to fire. Full conversion I am not sure will be possible. I've only seen it available on Avatar of Fire, which would brick FrostFire and in another Ascendancy node. The info that we have right now is 285% attack damage effectiveness at level 5, but that will certainly scale up as we level the skill. The other supports alongside FrostFire I'm using will be Concentrated Effect, which is again one of the strongest supports for AoE skills and adds 40% more damage at the cost of some AoE. And I'll say that the lower AoE is not going to be a huge deal on bosses, I think, because of the massive hitboxes that they have. For bossing, I'm probably going to socket Hourglass. This support gives 50% more damage with a high CDR penalty, but thankfully there is CDR all over the tree and we can carry multiple uses of the skill. So if we do freeze again and haven't come off cooldown, we get another shot anyway. If that ends up feeling bad, I might swap it out for something more generic like Weapon Elemental damage, which is a flat 25% more. And the last two supports are going to depend on how Ignite actually feels. So these supports will be two of Searing Flame, Eternal Flame, or Ignition. And we don't know what ailment thresholds look like, so it might make more sense to take Ignition and maybe drop one of the other two. But ideally, I'll take Eternal and Searing Flame together, as so long as I can mitigate their downsides with large enough hits against the bosses. Eternal Flame, in fact, might be the second strongest support in the setup behind FrostFire because we're looking to freeze in between ignites, and getting 8 seconds instead of 4 as a default would improve our DPS uptime considerably. Another amazing thing about using grenades for this is we have easy access to a handful of grenades, not just one, which means we effectively get a lucky ignite roll and the hit damage twice if we can drop 2 grenades on a boss. And an extra lucky ignite if we drop 3, and so on. This is because ignites only keep the largest ignite applied, and it would be an upside of using grenades to ignite versus something slower with a long cooldown like Hammer of the Gods. Let's talk about Ascendancy next. Why am I going Witch Hunter? Honestly, it's a generically strong and one of the more flexible Ascendancies from a playstyle perspective. I'm going to start with mapping, and then I will, in the end game, focus on bossing. Or what if I decide I want to roll a map blaster for a while instead of a bosser? I can respec out of maybe No Mercy and take Explode, which, if I'm being real, is one of the better mapping nodes out of any of the Ascendancies that I've seen. If we take a close look at the notable, you'll see that it deals 100% of mob monster life as physical damage. This is an unreal number. A more typical Explode health damage number would be in the 5 to 25% range if we take a look at PoE 1. I expect Zealous Inquisition to make Witch Hunter one of the better breach farmers because you get 20% chance to explode demons, and it's just really strong. Culling Strike also gives you more benefit in maps, and I think situationally could be very strong for really hard content like Delirium. We're getting to ignore 37.5% of an enemy health bar is really impactful. Okay, but we're theory crafting a bosser here, so why Witch Hunter instead of something else? And I'm going to start with Decimating Strike, which is a roll between 5 and 30% of a boss's health on the first hit, which if you've seen the length of some of these fights and gameplay footage is a large chunk. We also get concentration on enemies, which as it breaks provides less CDR for the boss. We don't have information on which skills will have cooldown for bosses yet, so it's a little bit up in the air, but I am in the camp that this will be generally very strong for safety and that they balanced around having dangerous mechanics, having cooldowns. No Mercy provides 30% more damage as concentration breaks, which is a healthy amount of more damage. It has a small amount of anti-synergy with culling and decimating, but my expectation is that if I'm rolling hybrid, I'll probably drop this node and take Zealous Inquisition to make my mapping feel really good. Witch Hunter is also positioned in the right place on the tree to take advantage of crossbow, grenade, and a handful of damaging ailment ignite wheels. I know that Jonathan said that, hey, it would be cool if Ascendancies all start at the same spot and we give more tree flexibility, but if you look at the tree that we have and think we have more ability to path from the center than we used to, then I have a bridge to sell you. Lastly, I'll add that I think Sorcerer Wood looks pretty solid if you wanted to lean into a defensive build, particularly with notables like Leatherbound Gauntlets and Titan Bindings and some others around the bottom of the tree that look like they work like Escape Artist did for Trickster. All in all, it feels like the most well-rounded option. So if something doesn't work out, there are a large number of backup plans I can pivot to, and that feels like a good reason to go Witch Hunter. Another good option is Deadeye. Deadeye will be a really strong choice for a crossbow build. The layup ascendancy nodes are Far Shot, Point Blank, which will give you some damage depending on how you plan on playing, and an additional projectile, which is going to be strong for clear, and maybe single target, depending if you can solve the corralling grenades problem. If you aren't going to weapon swap Rain of Arrows, which I'm sure they'll nerf given how busted the numbers look, but if you look, you pretty much have to take Tailwind and reduce damage for Tailwind stack. I think that there are two things that Deadeye doesn't have going for it though. In order to take full advantage of Wind Ward, you're going to have to invest in Invasion. I'm not yet convinced that pure evasion is a good idea for a bosser without maybe a bunch of energy shield investment to go with it and maybe some proxy for what Ghost Dance was in PoE 1. You probably can still get good utility out of it with hybrid armor evasion, but I don't know. And you're going to have to spend more points on the tree to reach the stir deck center and where all the grenade and crossbow wheels are. The second and more important reason I'm not going Deadeye is it's because it's the same thing we have in PoE 1, and that is not interesting to me. I want new mechanics and I want something fresh, and Deadeye is a really strong ascendancy, but it's not what I'm going to be starting. Gemling is interesting though and has some of the biggest potential upside of any of the ascendancies we've seen. We have zero idea what quality gives, and Jonathan is on record as saying 20% more power. And if you remember all quality gems from PoE 1, you'll know that varied potential comes from that quality, and some of it is almost certainly abusable. And since we're going in blind though, I'm just not willing to restart a character if it doesn't end up working out. I wish I could respec because I absolutely would do that. It does look generically strong, especially with the defensive nodes. I'm just not sure how strong it will be offensively. You could also go Titan and maybe lean into flash grenades, but that's not really what I'm here to talk about. This is a Freeze Ignite concept. Okay, so leveling is the next thing I'd like to cover. Now, we don't know, but I have spent a lot of time looking at gameplay footage, and I am planning on not taking Explosive Grenade first, partly because of Ziggity's advice, and partly because of this. If we take a look at how the skill works using Ziggity's gameplay footage, and take a look at where his mouse is when he fires. Then let's look at where the grenades actually go. He is using WASD, which I expect to also, and the grenades do hit where his mouse is, but then they roll past as the fuse burns down. Now, I've played delayed activation skills for years in Path of Exile, and by far the number one annoyance for people is delayed activation. For traps, you have trigger mechanisms though, and mines can be auto-detonated, but grenades need a new thing to trigger them called detonator skills, or you are stuck waiting for that fuse to expire. In the first several levels, you will have zero access to reducing that duration. Pair this with a long fuse duration and the aiming adjustment needed since they roll past your cursor, and you could break yourself by name locking a mob, meaning you'll miss it. It just doesn't look like a good time for the first few levels. And that might be the reason that some people have complained about a slow start. Instead, I plan on using high velocity rounds and flash grenades, which have a very short fuse until I can get maybe galvanic shards or ice shards or something. And then I'm going to lean into explosive grenade at level 22 when I can source a detonator skill like explosive shot. Now, I haven't seen anything past that, so it's hard to say what the right thing to do is on your way up to the end game. I'm just sharing with you what my personal plan is come Friday. Reload speed is also going to be really important, and what I plan on rushing on the passive tree is instant reload in the lower right, and I'll be weaving through some of the starting couple nodes to get some attack speed to improve my reloads starting at level 3. Once I get to Ascend around level 25, I am confident I'm going to take Zealous Inquisition first because most of the campaign you're going to be mapping and many of the bosses have ads and the Explode node is just incredibly good. I'm probably going to take Culling Strike and then Decimating Strike next, and then go into Witchbane last. I'm prioritizing the stuff that's going to make campaign and mapping feel better because I don't plan on being a pure or mostly pure bosser until I get fully into endgame. Elsewhere on the passive tree, there are some high value clusters which I'll quickly point out before moving on to my bossing backup plans. The first one I mentioned just a moment ago in instant reload and volatile grenades, which will improve your reload and duration respectively, generally making the build feel better to play. After that, I would probably next take the grenade wheel, which has the two strongest notables on it for grenades, granting an extra cooldown use and an extra projectile. It's been slightly nerfed since Dreamcore first revealed it, but 50% more duration shouldn't be a big deal with detonator skills. After that, the crossbow wheel at the bottom looks really strong if you feel like you need more damage, or the hybrid armor evasion wheel near it if you need more defense. Once you go Ignite, which I'm probably not going to try out before I get a good bow, some reasonable ailment chance, and at least a 4-link, there are a number of useful wheels that support damaging ailments and Ignite specifically. Some of them don't appear to be here, and again, I'm hoping Bajira and Dreamcore's videos are more current than what is on this tool, but there is a damaging ailment wheel here, for example, a number of chance to inflict ailment nodes like advanced munitions, which will improve both freeze and ignite. And then towards the left side of the tree, you'll find ignite specific nodes. I'm curious what this one is, for example. It looks like a flame and all of the other wheels have been thematic and it kind of looks like fire to me, but I don't know, we'll see. To scale damage, you'll want to look for magnitude of damaging ailments, magnitude of ignite, or duration and deal damage faster for those same two things. Finally, I want to throw out a bossing backup plan. I went over this in my last video, but cluster grenades looks really strong. We don't know what the mini nades card says yet, and that will dictate exactly how strong this is, but let me throw in a quick recap. What if I lay down a big glacial bolt that the boss is behind, and instead of trying to use it to throw shrapnel at the boss, I blink through it and fill the inside with 4 cluster grenades using the base, 2 additional from multiple projectiles, and a 4th from Grenadier. Then I seal the boss inside with a second glacial bolt to give the 1-second fuse time to expire. Do I get all my booms in one place? I don't know the answer, but I assure you that it will be the first thing I test when I hit level 52 and can equip cluster grenades, because AoE shotgunning is one of, if not the best damage multiplier in Path of Exile. Since I first mentioned this a week ago, I've had some time to follow up, and I do believe, based on the way the skill gem engraving system works, that we won't get access to cluster grenades until level 52. I also know about Fortress, but I think it'll be more difficult to fill, and that crossing a barrier or maybe self-casting a frost wall behind the boss to give a backstop is going to be easier to gather the launch grenades all together, unless you're comfortable standing inside the fortress with the boss, but to each his own. Alright everyone, for those who have watched the whole video, thank you. Drop a like if you found it useful. I'm going to go get some sleep and get ready for early access in a couple days. Subscribe if you want to follow along. Take care, and I will see you on the beach.